It was Christmas Eve, 1945, and honestly, there was this real sense of hope just filling the air all across America. The war was finally over. In Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family was celebrating. George and Jenny Sodder had really built a good life for themselves. George, who was an Italian immigrant, owned a successful trucking business. They lived in this large two-story timber house, and wow, it was just filled with the noise and love of their 9 children. That evening, the older children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, begged to stay up late. They wanted to play with the new toys their older sister Marion had bought them. Jenny Sodder agreed, but reminded them to do their chores before heading to bed. Then she took the youngest child, Sylvia, upstairs to sleep. No one could have known the darkness that was about to fall. The Sodder home was a landmark in their community, a real symbol of the American dream. It was just an ordinary holiday evening, steeped in the comforting traditions of a close-knit family. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The nightmare began on Christmas Eve, 1945, with a phone call that shattered the holiday silence. Around 1 a.m., Jenny Sodder was startled from sleep by the shrill ring, the house otherwise quiet with the children tucked in bed. She answered, her voice thick with sleep. On the other end, a woman asked for a name she didn't recognize, a strange laugh in her voice. Jenny, slightly unnerved, told the caller she had the wrong number and hung up. On her way back to bed, she noticed the downstairs lights were still on and the front door was unlocked, highly unusual. Assuming one of the older children had forgotten, she turned off the lights, secured the lock, and returned to her room. Just a half hour later, she was jolted awake again. This time it was a loud thud on the roof, followed by the distinct sound of something heavy rolling down. Before she could process it, the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. The house was on fire. Leaping from bed, she saw that her husband George's office on the ground floor was already engulfed. The flames spreading with unnatural speed. Panic erupted. In a desperate smoke-filled scramble, George and Jenny managed to shepherd 4 of their 9 children out into the freezing night air: Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr. They stumbled out coughing and gasping. Their relief turned to terror as they screamed for the other 5 children. Their bedrooms were in the attic, but the main staircase was already an impassable wall of fire. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty were still inside. George frantically tried to get to them. He raced to the side of the house to grab his heavy-duty ladder, which he always kept propped in the exact same spot. But when he got there, it was gone. The ladder was later found tossed in a steep embankment over 75 feet away. In a surge of desperation, George decided to drive one of his large coal trucks to the house to climb on top of it and reach the window. He jumped into the first truck and turned the key. Nothing. He tried the second. Again, silence. Both trucks, which had worked perfectly the day before, refused to start. Every rescue attempt was thwarted. All the Sodders could do was stand outside in the bitter cold, helpless, watching their home, and their 5 children trapped within it, burn. The fire department, delayed by a series of inexplicable problems, didn't arrive until morning. By then, the entire 2-story house was reduced to a smoking basement full of ash, having burned completely in less than 45 minutes. In the agonizing days following the fire, the official story began to crumble. George and Jenny Sodder could not accept that their children had been cremated. A parent's intuition told them something was wrong, a feeling bolstered by a strange detail. There had been no smell of burning flesh. Jenny, drawing on past experience at a crematorium, knew that human bones are surprisingly resilient. A house fire, even an intense one that only burns for 45 minutes before collapsing, simply doesn't generate the sustained 2,000-degree heat needed to completely obliterate bone. So George began his own search, sifting through every inch of the basement ash. But the search yielded absolutely nothing. Not a single bone fragment, not a single trace of the 5 children was ever found. Despite this, death certificates were issued for each child. The cause of the fire was officially listed as faulty wiring, a conclusion George disputed since he'd recently had the house rewired. Then, a crucial piece of evidence surfaced. A telephone repairman told George the phone line hadn't burned through. The clean edges indicated it had been deliberately cut, isolating the family. Frustrated by the dismissive local police, George Sodder took matters into his own hands and hired a private investigator from Washington, D.C. The investigator, C.C. Tinsley, quickly uncovered a disturbing conflict of interest. The very insurance salesman who had threatened George was on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident. He also pursued a bizarre rumor that the fire chief had found a human heart in the ashes and secretly buried it. When confronted, the chief led them to the spot. They dug up the box, only to find it contained beef liver untouched by the fire. A cruel and baffling deception. The Sodders' private investigation unearthed a chilling pattern of strange events leading up to that Christmas Eve. Weeks before the fire, a man had come to the house looking for work, warning George, "This is going to cause a fire someday." Another man, the one who tried to sell him life insurance, became angry when George refused. He ominously warned him, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed." The cut phone line, the disabled trucks, the missing ladder, it all pointed to a carefully planned attack. It wasn't just a fire, it was an operation designed to trap the children. And as the family sifted through the debris themselves, they made a strange discovery. They found a small, hard, rubber-like object. Some believe it may have been the remains of a napalm pineapple bomb. The Sodders consulted a pathologist from a crematorium who confirmed their beliefs. He stated that it was absolutely impossible for 5 skeletons to have been completely consumed in the fire, leaving no trace. The complete absence of physical evidence suggested one chilling possibility. The children were not in the house when it burned down. They had been taken. Refusing to let their children be forgotten, George and Jenny Sodder took their search public. In 1952, they erected a large, imposing billboard along Route 16 near their home. The faces of their 5 missing children stared out, alongside a promise of a $10,000 reward, a fortune at the time. For the next 37 years, through changing seasons and fading paint, that billboard stood as a stark, constant plea for answers, a testament to a family's undying love and their refusal to give up hope. Then, in 1967, after 22 years of agonizing silence, a letter arrived. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his late 20s, who bore a striking resemblance to their son Louis. The same dark curly hair, the same deep-set eyes. Hope, a feeling long dormant, surged through the family. On the back of the photo, a cryptic message was scrawled, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys, a 90,132 or 35. What could it possibly mean?" The Sodders hired a private detective to investigate the lead, but he took their money and was never heard from again, deepening the sense of conspiracy. The clue ultimately led nowhere. George Sodder passed away in 1969, still believing his children were alive somewhere. Jenny continued the search, transforming the site of their home into a memorial garden and wearing black for the rest of her life as a sign of mourning. She died in 1989, and the billboard was finally taken down. The surviving Sodder children and their descendants continue to seek answers to this day. The central question remains unanswered, suspended in time. What really happened to the Sodder children? Were they victims of a tragic fire, their remains somehow completely destroyed? Or were they stolen in the night, victims of a sinister plot that has remained a secret for nearly 80 years? The mystery endures, a chilling American ghost story haunting us still.